Hello, Jimmy Akin. We are taking your calls today. If you would like to join today's show, we've got a link in the description of this video. You can click on it. We've got someone who will be vetting the calls. And so if you would like to join, you'll be able to talk to them and see if you'd be a good fit for today's show. What we're talking about is demons, aliens. Well, remind me the...
aliens, demons, and demon aliens.
So aliens first, aliens, then demons, then demon aliens. And what we mean by demon aliens is, are aliens just demons? Is that the hypothesis that we should adopt as Christians? But maybe, I guess, more generally as well. It's a very common hypothesis that a lot of Christians actually believe. And so we'll be discussing that one, but we're breaking the show up into these three different sections. So we'll be discussing aliens, we'll get Jimmy to talk about some of the recent evidence that's come out about this topic. Then we're going to look at demons, which we actually had an exorcist call-in show on Wednesday that's performing really, really well. If you guys are interested, Father Vincent Lampert came on recently. We talked about that with him. On Wednesday, we took your calls. We had some really, really great calls on that show. So definitely highly recommend going and checking out that one if you guys are interested. And then the third section, again, is this sort of demon alien hypothesis. So, but Jimmy, it's great to have you back.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. I know this is a very special week. This entire week is a week-long first time for having live calls, and you've picked some really interesting guests to come on and talk about really interesting subjects. And it's also a fundraising drive because, as you and I mentioned in a video that came out over the weekend, we're doing some catch-up fundraising now. There have been various complications that have including a new baby, that have meant that Capturing Christianity hadn't been able to do all the fundraising that it would normally need to do. And so we've got into a kind of deficit situation where when we looked at the books last week or a week or so ago, we determined that we got about 5 months worth of funding in the bank. The ministry's been operating at a deficit, and fortunately it had some funding in the bank to allow that to go on, but we were getting near the bottom of that. And so we needed to do some catch-up fundraising to get back into a break-even position, because if the funds went to zero, as we explained, you'd have to get a different job to feed your family. You wouldn't be able to pursue Capturing Christianity. And this is something you feel really passionate about. It's something you felt called to do, which is why you started doing it full-time in the first place. And you're doing really great work. As I've mentioned, there are not a lot of apologetics channels that have the kind of deep apologetics content where you try to steel man things and you deal with things in a very calm manner. It's not just tribal chest thumping. And there are even non-Christians, including atheists and agnostics, who see the value in what you're doing and support it. We had one of them, Kevin Non-Tradicath, on the air on Monday, and he gave a big plug. Even though he's an agnostic, he still supports the ministry. And so it really is providing quality content that you don't get elsewhere. So we do need people. Over this last week, we've made good progress towards getting back to a break-even position. We are not yet there. And today is the last day of the official fundraising drive. So we really need to hear from folks. I don't know whether we'll make it all the way to break even today. We may or we may not. It depends on the response people give. But the good news is that, we do have 5 months, or, at the beginning of the week, we had 5 months to fix the problem. We've made significant progress on fixing it. And with your help, we're going to get all the way there, because this is a fixable problem. We only need 160 new donors at the $25 a month level, and the problem will be solved. And given the thousands of people who watch these videos, we can find 160 at the $25 a month level. That is a doable thing. So I feel very confident, but we do need your help. Cameron, how can people make their donations? How can they support the ministry? What are the mechanisms for that?
There are two main ways, and thanks for that, Jimmy, by the way, but there's two main ways. So you can donate on Patreon, which is what we're kind of pushing people toward, because the monthly donations is really what's going to keep this ministry going. So if you would like to support us, then head over to patreon.com/Categorizing. Capturing Christianity, and we've got a link to that in the description for your convenience. You just click it, you sign up. It only takes about 60 seconds to do so. You can donate at any level that you want to. If you prefer to do a one-time donation, or if for some reason you just don't really like Patreon, you want to support some other way, even on a monthly basis, you can do that through our donor box link, which we have linked from our website, and the website is linked in the description of the video. Just capturingchristianity.com/donate, and then click the one-time button, and then that'll take you to our donor box page. You can donate one time there or monthly. And in return, what we're doing special this week, for anyone that signs up and wants to support the ministry, we've got some things that we want to give back to you. We've been working really hard on these things, and one of them is a PDF of an article on gospel reliability, which basically summarizes the current dialectic on gospel reliability. And what that big word means, if you've never heard the term dialectic, it just means like the different arguments that exist on that topic. And so this is like a big summary of all of the arguments to think that the Gospels are reliable. It's a fantastic resource. It's available to anyone that signs up on Patreon right now. If you sign up, you get access to it immediately. Doesn't matter what amount you donate at. It doesn't even have to be $5 a month. It can be $1 a month, and you'll get access to that PDF. At the $25 amount, we've got this new book that just came out with from Pat Flynn, and this is what we're giving out at the $25 amount level. So if you sign up at the tier 3 amount, we're giving away this book by Pat Flynn, The Best Argument for God. It's a new book. It's got really high reviews from everyone who's read it, atheists, Christians. Everyone thinks that this is a really good contribution. So we're giving this away at the $25 amount. Something I'm super excited about is at the $50 amount. So if you want to support us at that amount on Patreon, we're going to send this sculpture to you. Let me put it up on the screen here. This is a sculpture that is actually taken from the Shroud of Turin. So it's based on the image that we find in the Shroud. The artist that worked on this painstakingly, like you can see, if I can zoom in here, you can see the different wounds on Jesus, even in his side right here. Let me see if I can get the light to, yep, so you can see it. So they based it directly from the image that we find on the Shroud, even the holes in his feet and in his arms. And this is something you can put on your bookshelf. You can even hang it on your wall if you'd like. But this is something that we are sending to the $50 tier patrons as a thank you. This is not something you can buy anywhere online. It's worth about $350 is what the artist actually prices it at. So we're giving it away at that amount. And yeah, we just wanted to say thank you guys for considering supporting the ministry. We are in a deficit situation, so we do need to hear from you today, if possible. But yeah, that's pretty much what we got going on.
Yeah, and we also want to mention that the thank you gifts are cumulative. So everybody who donates at any level gets the PDF. And in addition to the PDF, if you donate at the $25 level, you also get the book. And in addition to the PDF and the book, if you donate at the $50 level, you get all three. You get the PDF, the book, and the statue, which you can put on your bookshelf or your desk or hang on your wall as a reminder of our Lord and his sufferings for us.
All right, let's go ahead and now turn to the subject for today. And again, we're doing call-in. This is a call-in show. So we've got a few people actually already lined up. And the first subject that we're discussing is demons. Aliens.
Aliens.
Oh, which one is it?
Aliens.
I can't remember the order here. So aliens. Okay. Mm-hmm. We'll discuss aliens first, then we'll discuss demons, and then we'll discuss the demon-alien hypothesis. Okay, so I'm about to turn it over to Jimmy, but I actually... I sent Jimmy a message earlier this week. I said that I have a surprise for him. Okay.
Oh,
and
you
so
did, yes.
He doesn't know what that surprise is. Yeah. But here it is. Just 1 second. Let me see if I can.
Oh, there you go.
There it is.
Okay.
There it is. How's it look?
Good. It looks good. Now, for video purposes, you probably want to tilt it back a little bit so that it doesn't overshadow your eyes.
It's going to look a little weird if I...
Yeah, but it looks really good.
Yeah?
That's very, very stylish. I approve.
Yes. Nice. Okay. I even wore my like Western, the most Western shirt that I had in my closet. I just pulled it out. But yeah, I'll see if I can keep this on the whole day, but we'll see. Okay, so we're discussing demons first. So let's go ahead.
Aliens.
Aliens. Look at this. I need to write this down. Jimmy, I need to write this down.
Just remember, alien starts with A. It's the first letter. We discuss it first.
There you go. Sorry, my head's in like my brain's in like 1,000 different places right now. So forgive me if I'm a little bit spaced out right now. Okay, so I guess I can also mention that we will be taking super chats. So if you'd like to support the ministry that way, we will take super chats and respond to those and answer them. Let's see if I can get a little bit more light on my face. Should I just hold my head like this the whole time? Maybe I can sit back like this, like a real cowboy.
Might be uncomfortable, but whatever works for you.
This was a bad idea. Okay. Let's go ahead and pull in our first caller. Let's
live
do
in
it.
Texas. You're entitled.
Oh my goodness. The guests are doing some funny stuff here. Okay, let me actually go ahead and pull him in. All right, so we've got Colin on the line. Look at him. He's got his own hat. Wow.
Welcome, Colin.
Thank you. I just grabbed it because I saw Canon Law also grabbed a hat. So yeah.
Yep.
It's not as good as your guys. It's just a Canadian Tire. So.
And that looks like a Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World T-shirt, is it?
Because
it's always aliens.
Yeah. The Tri Blend is honestly the best shirt I've ever worn. Like I have a lot of material sort of sensitivities, and it's great. But yeah.
Oh, cool. So what can I do for you?
Okay, my question, it could involve both aliens and demons, but given that we know that all creatures, including aliens, demons, human spirits, are bound by time, and the dimension of time in some way seems to be linked with dimensions of space, as indicated by Einstein's theory of relativity, could demons manipulate an alien civilization using demonic, faster-than-light communications, or would demons or the information that they carry still be bound relativistically since they are bound by time?
Okay, so we don't have a firm answer to this question because we haven't been able to do tests with angels or demons just being fallen angels, where we could actually test this empirically. However, in testing that's been done with apparent, I want to stress that's apparent, but with apparent human psychic functioning, it doesn't appear to be light speed limited. And so you can theoretically remote view something that's farther away and get information about it than the speed of light would allow that information to reach you. And there have been parapsychological experiments done that way. Now, one of the things they did in the Middle Ages was they used angels, I should say, as kind of a model for understanding human consciousness. So you would have thinkers like St. Thomas Aquinas and John Duns Scotus, who would try to learn about human consciousness by thinking about alien consciousness and how angelic minds work. And so if that parallel holds, then if humans are able to do something that's not light speed limited, then presumably angels, including the bad ones, would also be able to do something that was light speed limited. And thus, hypothetically, demons could have an effect on alien cultures, just like they had an effect on our culture, and they might be coordinating things without it being limited by the speed of light. So hypothetically, that's possible. As with anything involving either aliens or demons, though, I think we need evidence. And, we can think about and speculate about possibilities, but as long as we don't have actual evidence that something is happening, they remain just possibilities and not serious proposals. Does that help?
That would help. I guess something that I could think of in terms of evidential information there, like from anything that we have in terms of accounts of alien interactions or demonic interactions, if there is some sort of possible faster than light communication via demons that would be possible, would some of those interactions then not be limited by technology of those alien civilizations, in terms of that there could be some sort of interaction with us faster than light that we could see in an alien encounter case?
I'm not entirely sure what you're asking. Are you asking, did demons give aliens faster than light technology so they could get here?
More in the sense that somebody could communicate with aliens faster than light via something like psychic functioning, or that demons could tell us something about or lie about something about aliens faster than light.
Well, okay, so if psychic functioning is real, and if it's not light speed limited, then presumably we could learn things about aliens faster than light, possibly by having telepathic contact with them. And in fact, there have been a wide variety of people who have claimed to have telepathic contact with aliens. In fact, in the 1950s, there were a whole group of people known as contactees, many of whom claimed to be in mental communication with various aliens. Unfortunately, almost all of the contactees look like frauds. So I don't think we have particularly good evidence there. With regard to the second question, could demons tell us about something about aliens? Well, they could. And it could be faster than light on the theories that we've been discussing. They could, faster than light, learn about some alien world and then tell us about that alien world. But the problem is you can't trust anything a demon says. They're working for the father of lies. And so if you know you're talking to a demon, you need to just set aside anything it tells you and do not believe it. I'm at some point in the future, I'm going to be doing an episode of Mysterious World about this, because I see a lot of people today, including exorcists who ought to know better, reporting things that demons have told them in exorcisms as if they're the truth. And I'm sorry, but you just cannot trust anything a demon says. So they could hypothetically tell us about something about aliens, but you couldn't trust them if they did.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I think that pretty much answers the question. Just wanted to say thanks for the last couple weeks ago making some somewhat Canadian related mysteries on Mysterious World. I always appreciate that. Yeah. I'd suggest
problem.
the SS Kamloops if you want another one that's somewhat Canadian related.
Send me an email and I'll look into it.
Nice. All right. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Cam.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Okay.
Now,
so
that first call, and I was happy to answer it. The first call involved both aliens and demons, but just to let folks know, this is the aliens part of the show. So we're really going to try to focus on aliens here and not make the whole show about the alien demon hypothesis. So just want to let folks know about that.
Yeah, and we do actually have Kevin. I think his question is related to UFOs. But I wanted to ask you, Jimmy, I added a little bit of light here. Can you see my face a little bit better on the camera now?
Yeah, it looks good.
There we go. Okay.
Looks good.
Yeah. Just want to make sure you guys can see me. Okay. Another thing, Jimmy, is that I didn't give you a chance like we normally do to kind of talk about the different subject. Do you have anything that you'd like to say on the topic of aliens before we come to the next caller?
Yeah, so I think it'd be helpful if I've studied ufology a lot, and I've studied the science of, the possibilities of life on other planets. And I thought it'd be helpful to just give people a sense of where I am on this after all the study I've done, because a lot of people are UFO dismissive. They don't believe aliens are possible. Or they don't believe they could get here, or other people go to the other extreme and they think, oh yeah, they're definitely here. And, they're coming into my bedroom at night and taking me off and abducting me. And so I think that we need to be careful and discerning in this area. I tend to divide the question into three sub-questions. The first question is, does life of any form exist elsewhere in the cosmos? And there are people who hold different opinions about this. I've seen some, like the Christian astronomer Hugh Ross, argue that the existence of life is so unlikely on naturalistic grounds that it shouldn't exist anywhere else in the universe, any kind of life at all. But the problem is that it exists here. So even if life is so statistically impossible, that it needs an intelligent designer to put it someplace, well, God did that and he put it here. And if he put it here, he could put it elsewhere too. So arguments from statistical unlikelihood on naturalistic grounds don't work when you've got an intelligent designer who is in control of the cosmos. So if God put life here, he could put it elsewhere. And so I think we need to be open to the possibility of life in some form, even if it's not intelligent life, even if it's just bacteria elsewhere. I think we have to be open to that. And my guess is that probably exists. And I have two reasons for that. One reason is the cosmos is so huge that it just seems a little implausible to me that God would create this enormous cosmos and have only mankind be in it. If he made all these extra planets, I mean, there are just trillions of extra planets in the cosmos, and the thought that he didn't put life on any of them, I find implausible. The second reason I find it implausible.
Do you mind if I pause right there and ask you a little bit more about that? Would you does that apply only if theism is true? So like if God exists, your reasoning is kind of like if God exists and created the universe and created us, then it would seem like it seems implausible that he would only create life in one spot. But then the question would be like, suppose that atheism were true, there was no God, and we were just here by chance. Would you think that would be as likely? Would there still be other?
Yeah, I think that the argument then would have to shift to statistical grounds of how likely is life to arise without an intelligent designer. And many scientists think that it can arise without an intelligent designer. And so that would be a different argument for it existing elsewhere, given the size of the universe. So my specific argument that I proposed is based on theism, but that's a theistic argument that's granting the premise that it's so unlikely on naturalistic grounds that you wouldn't expect it anywhere else in the cosmos. However, I can also challenge that premise and say God may have set up the universe in such a way, again, reverting to a theistic position, where he doesn't need to intervene in every case in a miraculous way to get life going. He may have set up the universe so that it forms, based on the principles he built into the universe in various locations. And then if that's the case, if the laws of the universe are set up in such a way as to produce life under certain circumstances, then you may or may not believe in God. So that's kind of an exploration of my first argument that would not necessarily presuppose theism.
Okay.
My second argument is I think we got pretty good evidence there's life on Mars. I did a two-parter of Mysterious World about this, and in the 1970s, when the Viking probes arrived at Mars and they ran the tests for life, the tests turned out positive results. They said there's life here, at least a bacterial life in the soil. And NASA then changed the success criteria after the experiment had been run, which is bad science. You don't change your criteria after you run the experiment in order to get the result you want. And so we already had that as positive indication of life back in the 1970s. And there has been considerable more data come in. In fact, the guy who was behind the 1970 experiments kept a track of all the new data coming in supporting the existence of life on Mars, and I linked to that in my episode on life on Mars. Just to give a couple of brief notes about what some of that evidence consists of, there are seasonal methane cycles on Mars where it appears that methane is being released into the Martian atmosphere in conjunction with the seasons, and that's something that happens with life here on Earth. Also, there are objects on Mars that can be seen from orbit that look like some kind of plant life. They look kind of like trees. There also are objects on Mars that some of our probes down on the surface have seen, which look like mushrooms growing overnight. And so I think that there is significant evidence for life on Mars. That doesn't mean it evolved on Mars, or doesn't mean it started on Mars. It may have started on Earth and gotten blown to Mars by meteorites, or so it may have originated here on Earth, but it looks like there is some kind of life on Mars, and that would also tend to support the proposition that there's life elsewhere in the universe. So if I had to guess, and it's a guess, but if I had to guess, I think life is likely, of some kind, is likely to be elsewhere in the universe. What about intelligent life? Well, I'm quite open to the proposition that intelligent life is very rare, because in the 4 billion years that we've had life here on Earth, we've only had intelligent life for a tiny fraction of that time. And so I could imagine many worlds where intelligent life doesn't exist and needs a particular set of very rare circumstances to arise. So I could imagine it's rare, but if but the universe is so big with just trillions and trillions of planets. If I had to guess, I would probably guess, yeah, I think God probably created other intelligent beings elsewhere. Not as confident of that as unintelligent life, but I would guess maybe he would. And so that would probably be my bet if I had to make a bet on this. Are aliens coming here? Well, here we have a technological challenge because all of the transportation systems that humans have come up with are light speed limited. Having said that, we do have faster than light travel is not in principle forbidden by the laws of physics. You often hear that it is, but that's not accurate. What is forbidden by the laws of physics is using conventional propulsion to get up to the speed of light. Because for objects with mass, in order to get close to the speed of light, you have to progressively use more and more energy. And in order to reach the speed of light, you'd have to use infinite energy with a massive object. But actually, and you can check, for example, some videos by the German physicist Sabine Hassenfelder, among others, there are to talk about, well, actually, while we can't reach the speed of light, that doesn't mean we can't exceed it. And there have been proposals like the Alcubierre warp drive, which don't involve local motion that's faster than the speed of light. Instead, what the Alcubierre drive does is it stretches space before, in front of, and behind the ship so that the ship ends up not in its own little warp bubble. It's not moving at all, but that warp bubble can move faster than the speed of light because space is not bound. The expansion of space is not bound by the speed of light. In fact, the universe itself is expanding faster than the speed of light. So if we could figure out how to build an Alcubierre drive, it would work in principle to get elsewhere. So I don't consider it impossible. In fact, even without faster than light travel, you could colonize a galaxy in a million years using slower than light self-replicating probes. And so even without faster than light being possible, I don't think it's impossible that aliens could find us and come here. The question is, have they? And here I'm open, but I'm not convinced. I've studied a lot of UFO reports, and some of them are harder to explain than others. Most of them are naturally explainable. Some of them are harder to explain than others. But I have yet to find a case that convinces me that they're here. What I find interesting is that our own Defense Department has been chronicling encounters with objects that we do not know how to explain. Now, they could be some kind of hyper advanced technology that we're working on, but the left hand is not telling the right hand what it's doing, or it could be hyper advanced technology from one of our competitor nation states, although I I frankly don't think Russia and China are as advanced as that. So there are things that we don't know how to explain. I am not convinced that they're alien, but I'm open to the possibility that they're alien. So I guess that's a general sketch of where I am on all this.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to actually turn to a caller. He looks like he's at work.
Sure.
So I'd like to go ahead and pull him in so that he can get his question out and get back if he needs to. So this one is, let me pull him in here. His name is Aaron, I believe.
Howdy,
and he's
Aaron.
got a question about the size of the universe.
Okay.
Hey, how y'all doing? I hope the trucks and stuff aren't making too much noise. But yeah, recently I looked into how big the universe is. So like, obviously our solar system, the planets that we normally see when we're looking at the pictures of Earth and compared to the other ones. But then also how small that is in the galaxy in which we live in. And then how small the galaxy is within the universe, like the observable universe that we know about. And so I'm an atheist. I don't believe in the Bible anymore. So if the Bible is true and Jesus is sent down for us, God made all of humanity just for this purpose. Is the size of the universe a bit of an overkill for that?
So, could you restate what you're understanding the reason that God made man for?
Hmm. I guess it would be to worship God, but I
Mhm.
guess I'm saying if we're put on this earth just for this purpose, and the earth is put in this universe just for that purpose, why so much?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it is counterintuitive that God would make a universe that's this big. I mean, the part of it we can see is 93 billion light years across. And that's
Mhm.
just the part we can see. We have evidence that it's like, because of its flatness, we have evidence that it's probably at least the part we can't see is at least like 250 times bigger at a
Mhm.
minimum, and it may be even bigger than that. So it does seem counterintuitive to me to say that out of all that enormous, vast space with stars and planets and galaxies, that we would be the only thing here. It does seem like
Mhm.
overkill. Now, to be fair to a person who would say he does think we're truly alone, um, God does other surprising things on a theistic view. You know, God becoming man, that's kind of surprising. Quantum physics, that's kind of surprising.
Mhm.
So much of space being empty, that's kind of surprising. And so God
Mhm.
does, on a theistic view, do surprising things. And it's thus not impossible for, on a theistic view, to suppose that God created this enormous, vast space in order to enable just the human race to exist. So I want to be fair to the
Mhm.
position that would to that position, but it does strike me as counterintuitive. Unfortunately, so do a lot of other things that happen to turn out to be true.
Mhm. Gotcha. Hey, would it be fair if I add just one more question? And I'm okay
Sure.
hopping off and just letting y'all discuss this. But
What's your question?
so if we were to assume there is alien life, would Jesus's forgiveness cover aliens?
Okay, I actually did
Totally
a whole.
hypothetical.
No, sure, happy to handle it. I actually did an episode of Mysterious World on this. It's episode 55. So you can go
Hmm.
to mysterious.fm/55 to hear the whole episode about the religious implications of aliens. But in principle, what we can say with confidence is that if aliens are in need of redemption, which they might not be, they might be unfallen, like the
Hmm.
Venusians in C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy. They were a race that didn't fall.
Yeah, lucky
But
them.
yeah, exactly. But if they are in need of redemption, then Christ's death on the cross would be sufficient to cover them because Christ is God, and he's therefore his death is of infinite value, and something of infinite value will cover an infinite number of sins. And so if they are in need of redemption, Christ's death on the cross here on earth would be sufficient to cover them. The question would then be, is it God's will to apply what Christ did on the cross here to them, or would he prefer to redeem them in some other way, such as perhaps by having Christ incarnate on their planet to give them a visible demonstration of God's love for them, the same way Christ gave us a visible demonstration of his love for us?
Hmm. Yeah, totally get it. All right. Well, thank you all so much for taking my call.
No
All
prob.
right. Thank you so much, Aaron. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's go ahead and get some super chats in here. So we've got
Okay.
Shaleback Bow. Go ahead and pull this super chat in here. Happy Saturday from Tokyo. Does Cthulhu
Ohio
from the
gozaimasu.
HP does Cthulhu, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly,
Mhm.
from the H.P. Lovecraft fiction, considering he's from another universe, count as an alien demon?
Yeah, so in H.P. Lovecraft's fiction, which I have read all of it, Cthulhu is basically an alien who is hostile towards humanity. He does kind of he's fated in H.P. Lovecraft's universe to destroy the world. He's currently asleep in a sunken city in the Pacific Ocean, and he kills stuff. So he's an evil alien. He may be interdimensional, and so that's that may make him a little less rooted in our dimension. But one of the things about Cthulhu is he is physical, and Cthulhu's physicality is essential to his functioning, because in the story that introduces him, which is called The Call of Cthulhu, his sunken city rises and some sailors encounter it. And Cthulhu is waking up and he kills a bunch of the sailors, but the survivors get in their ship and that took them to the island. And the way they deal with Cthulhu is they ram him. His head has come up out of the water. He's monstrously huge, but his head has come up out of the water, and they ram him in his head with the prow of the ship, and that causes Cthulhu's head to pop, and there's this horrible noise, and there's this horrible smell and stuff like that. But the bottom line is Cthulhu then has to sink back down with his city to regenerate, and so the world is saved on this occasion. But that would show us that in this fictional universe, Cthulhu is a physical being. He may be able, in some cases, to, shift between dimensions or something, but he is a physical being that can be injured. And that's different than demons. Demons are bad angels. Angels do not natively have bodies on the Christian view. And so you can't physically injure an angel or a demon, but you can physically injure Cthulhu. So I would put him in the category of hostile alien rather than actual alien demon.
On that note, let me go ahead and pull in Kevin, who is our resident agnostic caller. And he's actually got the book. Put it back up on the screen.
So this is a collection of H.P. Lovecraft's short stories. And I pulled open The Call of Cthulhu because it's, of course, a classic. So Jimmy, you and I will have this in common, our love of Lovecraft. I have a super nerdy tattoo sleeve on this arm. You can see part of it here. And I actually have all the way up here, so you're not going to be able to see it, but I have a Shoggoth from At the Mountains of Madness up here, like the monster that's like a ball of eyes that just rolls around in that ancient city that they found at the South Pole
Antarctic.
or whatever. Yeah. So
I'm a big...
Yes, I love At the Mountains of Madness is perhaps one of my favorite stories I ever told. I think it's awesome. But I have a question for you, Jimmy, about aliens. My question, as much as I love Lovecraft, my question is not about Lovecraft. It is about aliens, though. I have been reading a different book, Unidentified Flying Hyperobject, by the Catholic philosopher Dr. Jim Madden. And on page 7 of Unidentified Flying Hyperobject, Dr. Madden says the following. As someone trained in the philosophy of religion, I was struck in particular by the fact that the evidence for the reality of the UFO, whatever it is at least as good as the evidence supporting the founding miracles of the major religious traditions. Whatever you think about those particular claims, I don't believe that they completely lack evidential support, as in the traditional miracle claims have enough going for them evidentially that they cannot be ruled out. If that is the case, then it seems that we can't rule out the UFO either. And given the continued frequency and quality of UFO reports, there are very good grounds to rule them in. I know that the church does not obligate her members to believe in aliens, but I want to know if Catholics ought to believe in aliens, not because the church says so, but because of epistemic considerations. Jimmy, do you agree that the evidence for the UFO is at least as good as the evidence for the resurrection, as Dr. Madden says in Unidentified Flying Hyperobject? And if so, does that give Catholics, and non-Catholic Christians too, for that matter, an epistemic obligation to believe in UFO phenomena as well? Thank you so much for taking my question.
Okay. So I would say that I would need to read his book to see what kind of argument he makes. And I haven't read his book. I would say that I could see how evidence for UFOs is of comparable epistemic quality to events reported of a foundational nature in some religions, like, for example, Zoroastrianism. Okay, there was probably a Zoroaster at some point, but we can't even figure out what century he lived in. So I think that the foundation of Zoroastrianism is pretty weak. And that would be consistent with evidence regarding UFOs also being pretty weak. I view the evidence for the resurrection as being pretty high. And so I would need to see what UFO cases he proposes for being that high. But I would say in general terms that Christians need to believe whatever the evidence supports. So I think the evidence supports the resurrection. Christians need to believe in that. And if there is comparable evidence for the existence of aliens piloting UFOs here to Earth, then I would say Christians need to believe in that, just like they need to believe anything that the evidence supports.
Okay, cool. And I'll add to that, this book doesn't actually get into the evidence for the UFO. This is very much so a philosophy book. So what it does is it kind of uses the UFO and Plato's cave to kind of talk about the limits of
knowledge.
Like, yeah, the limits of knowledge, and kind of how we should all probably be a little bit more humble, not just about what we know, but about what we can know. So it's an interesting read. It's not strictly about the evidence for the UFO. It's more about, the epistemology of the UFO, which is really cool. But yeah, so it sounds like you conditionally agree with Dr. Madden in as much as, like, if the evidence is indeed as good as Dr. Madden says that it is, then yeah, Catholics and non-Catholic Christians may indeed be obligated.
Yeah, I think people are obligated to believe whatever the evidence supports under ordinary circumstances. And if you've got good evidence, whether it's about UFOs or the resurrection of Jesus, or does gravity work, or, does your wife love you, whatever you've got good evidence for, you need to believe that.
That's really cool. And I've asked other Catholics this question before, and they've kind of laughed at me. And I didn't think that you would laugh at me, and I'm actually quite pleased that you're more or less on my side for this one. So thanks, Jimmy, for taking my question.
Yeah, no problem. I make a point of taking every question I'm asked seriously. I never want to make someone feel uncomfortable or laugh at them or dismiss them when they ask a question. Incidentally, since we were doing a little bit of Lovecraft Bond in there, I'm sure, despite the fact you're agnostic and I'm not, I'll happen to mention you may be familiar with. I think you're probably familiar with Robert M. Price.
Yes.
He's a former Christian who is, I guess, agnostic at this point. In fact, he's a Jesus mythicist. Well, he also is a Lovecraft scholar, and he's published a few collections of short stories, either by or written in the style of Lovecraft. And a while back, a few years ago, when I was living in San Diego, he was coming to a local church to do a debate. And so I went to the debate, and I brought one of his own books and got Lovecraft books, and got him to autograph it for me. And he knew I was a Christian, but also a fan of Lovecraft literature. And he referred in his inscription to both the Necronomicon and the New Testament, and said, please do not confuse them. And I have ever since endeavored not to do that.
That's an awesome story. And if you asked me if Dr. Price was a Lovecraft fan, I probably would have said, I think I remember him mentioning that, maybe, but I definitely didn't know that he wrote them. And that's super cool that
or at least edited. Yeah.
Okay. That's
all right. There's way too much Lovecraft nerding out happening. We gotta switch. Kevin, you gotta get out of here.
Thanks all.
All right, Kev. Thanks for calling in. Let's take some more super chats. We've got a few that were sent in. So let's take the next one here from Pop. We actually did some popping on Monday talking about pop. Okay. What does Jimmy Akin think about Daniel O'Connor's stance on alien demons and his use of the Catechism about man being made in the image of God to support it? Thank you and happy Friday.
Okay, so first of all, I should say that Daniel O'Connor is someone I consider, something of a friend. I don't know him real well, but he and I have had positive interactions in the past. We have significantly different views on things. And he did a video where he responds to some comments I made when I was asked about this subject on Pints with Aquinas. And he is of the opinion that there are a couple of paragraphs in the Catechism, and this is not his only argument, but he is of the opinion that there are a couple of paragraphs in the Catechism that require Catholics to disbelieve in aliens. And I have to say, he's misreading the Catechism. That's about as polite a way as I can to say it. He's not taken into account either the language or structure of the paragraphs that he quotes. There are paragraphs, memory serves, 355 and 356. And it's clear that they're talking about, what they say is that of all visible creatures, and then they also use the phrase of all earthly creatures, man is the only one that bears the image of God. And that's true. Of all the visible creatures here on earth, man's the only one that has the image of God. And so that doesn't tell us anything about creatures on other planets. Also, what he has to do to try, because one of the sentences explicitly refers to earthly creatures, and what he's got to do is partition that sentence away from the sentence that refers to of all visible creatures, only man has the image of God, and insist that we read the image of God, the visible creatures sentence independently of the earthly creatures sentence, but they're right next to each other. The visible creature sentence is the one right before the earthly creature sentence. And so the natural, obvious thing to do hermeneutically is read the two sentences in light of each other. If you build a rigid wall between them, then what you're doing is cutting off the visible creature sentence from its immediate context. And that's bad hermeneutics. That is not how you read a document. As they sometimes say, a little cheekily, a proof text without context is a pretext. And if you're ripping this one sentence out of its immediate context that refers to earthly creatures, you're fundamentally misreading the text. So as much as I like Daniel, I have to say that he's just misreading the Catechism here.
All right, we have one more caller on the topic of aliens, and then we're going to switch over and discuss demons. So, but let's take just maybe a couple more super chats here before we transition. This one from John Black. Does Jimmy ever have any free time?
Not as much as I'd like. When I tend to have free time is at the end of the day when I'm winding down and getting ready for bed, and maybe then I'll put on a TV show or a movie on Amazon to watch.
There you go. Yep, not a lot of free time. I mean, if you're a content creator, that's just something that's true in general. If you're a content creator, putting out content. Brute Facts Podcast. What in the Texas Tar Nation, emu roping, Budweiser drinking, mutton busting, rootin' tootin', Sasquatch stalking, weird corner of the Matrix is this? I think he's talking about the hats.
Well, it's and probably what else we're talking about.
True.
I would suppose that it's an emu roping, Budweiser drinking, mutton busting, rootin' tootin', Sasquatch talking, weird corner of the Matrix. Where we also talk about aliens, UFOs, and demons.
Some fascinating topics. Really, I mean, these are interesting topics, or important topics to discuss, because they get brought up all the time in culture, and we do need to speak to them from an intellectual point of view as Christians. And so we're doing what we can to do that and address it. So Jesus says, I assume that's how to pronounce his name, Jesus Hernandez, if aliens do exist during an exorcism, are demons prohibited by God not to reveal any information?
If aliens do exist during an exorcism, are demons prohibited by God from not reveal any information? I assume that means about the aliens. And are demons forbidden to tell us about aliens during an exorcism? And I'm not aware of any such rule. I mean, one could propose that God has forbidden them to speak of it, but But the thing I mentioned about demons is you can't trust whatever they say, and you can't trust whatever they refrain from saying, because they're liars. And sometimes they'll lie by disclosing stuff that's not true, and sometimes they'll lie by withholding stuff that is true. So I don't think we can draw any inferences about truth or falsity of any proposition based on what demons are going to tell you.
All right, let's now turn to our next caller. His name is Clark, and he's got a question about aliens. So go ahead,
Hey, Clark.
Hey guys, thanks for having me again. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, can hear you great.
Just want to say real quick, thanks for all that you do. I've learned a lot from both of you. And my question is, if humanity ever makes contact with other intelligent life on other planets, should we expect that, and you kind of touched on this with 2 callers ago, but should we expect to find that Christ has, revealed himself to them? And would he have had to have sacrificed himself again for them? It kind of seemed unfair to me if these were also creatures created in the image of God, but they didn't have that revelation that we've been granted here on earth. And so I just wanted to know your thoughts if it makes more sense that Christ is visiting all the other planets with intelligent life out there, or if we make contact with them and we find that there's no evidence that he's visited them, is that evidence that Christianity might not be true?
Okay, so I think that I'm very hesitant to tell God what he can and can't do. And so, in fact, I'm even a bit more hesitant to do that than Aquinas is. So I would say that it's quite possible that what I think I can say with good confidence is that if there is life, and that's an if there is life that has human level intelligence out there, then God will be known to them in some way. Either they'll deduce the existence of God, because it is possible to deduce the existence of God from the various arguments for God, like we talk about here on Capturing Christianity, or God may go beyond just what they could deduce for themselves and reveal himself. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody on their planet is going to be a believer in God, because even here on earth, not everybody's a believer in God. Buddhists don't believe in God. Historically, most Buddhists were atheists, or at least agnostics. And so before the rise of the later forms of Buddhism, the original form of Buddhism was atheist agnostic. And so we have a bunch of people here on earth who have mistaken ideas about God, but we also have people here on earth who have correctly reasoned their way to God, or who have been in touch with God via revelation. And I would expect similar situations on other planets. Now, we might find exceptions. We might find a planet where everybody believes in God, or we might find a planet where nobody believes in God. But at least based on the one data point we have, which is the planet Earth, I would expect we'd see situations on other planets that are a lot like what we see here on Earth. And here on Earth, if we look at its history, people did not always know about Jesus. They didn't know about him for all the time before he incarnated. And the Jewish people had some hints that he was coming, but he didn't arrive until 3/2 BC. And so if we found an alien planet and there had not been a revelation of Christ or an incarnation of Christ there yet, I would say, well, it could be that God's not planning to do that here, that he plans to let the aliens know about him in some other way. Or it could be we just haven't got up to their equivalent of 3 or 2 BC and their incarnation hadn't happened yet. So I think there are lots of possibilities, and we have to wait and see if there are aliens, when we meet them, what they do or don't know about God. But I don't think that tells us anything about whether Christianity is true or false. We have independent evidence for that. And what we would be learning about is not through alien contact, is Christianity true or false, but what has God done with this alien people so far?
Can you touch on real quick, it's kind of unrelated, but why did why did God choose a specific point in time to become incarnate? Like, why not come multiple times throughout, to all peoples, all generations? Why just one time? And
Yeah, well, what we can say is that if we look at the revelation we have in Scripture, God likes to start small and go big. So it all starts with the chosen people. All starts with Abraham, and then it grows from there. And in the same way, he wanted to start with his son incarnating one time, and then having the Christian faith grow from there. And he wanted to include. I was just talking about this, I think yesterday on Catholic Answers Live, but he wanted to wait until there were a certain number of people in the world that he wanted to reach. He could have ended the world right after Adam. He could have had Jesus be born, and then a grand total of, say, 5 people get to go to heaven. But God wanted more than that. And so he allowed the human race to grow before he instituted the chosen people and before he sent his son. And he even put his chosen people at the crossroads of the old world. They're not way down in sub-Saharan Africa. They're not far east in Asia. They're not far west in Europe. And so they were right at the center. And what that allowed to happen when the Christian faith started was it easily spread in these different directions. And so I think that what we can say with confidence is God wanted to enable the salvation of a large number of people. And so he waited until the human race had grown to a sufficient size and had attained certain civilizational requirements like widespread peace, economic development, and road systems that would allow the faith of his son to spread easily, compared to other places and times. And so I think that's why Christianity, or part of why Christianity happened where and when it did. And then God, because he's merciful and doesn't expect people to respond to things they don't know about, he'll show mercy to everyone who is innocently unaware of the fact that they should embrace the Christian faith. And that includes all the people before the time of Christ. So they'll all be taken care of and dealt with fairly and lovingly.
All right, Clark, really appreciate your call. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
All right. See you later. Okay, so let's take some more super chats. We'll take about 3 this time, and then we'll switch topics to discussing demons. Okay. All right, Truth Seeker says, why do you believe a God exists? What convinced you?
Well, okay. There are multiple arguments for the existence of God, and I could go into considerable depth on this, but I don't think Cam wants me to go into considerable depth at the moment because it would get us away from our topic.
Just give a summary.
But the argument that I find most useful for the existence of God, or certainly one of the arguments I find most useful, is the contingency argument, which seeks to explain why is something the way it is. And we're not talking about its history. We're not talking about how it got the way it is over time. We're asking the question, why? Just pretend the past and the future don't exist. Why is this object the way it is right now? If I have a black iPhone, what makes it black right now? And you could say, well, because it could be, some other color. Apple has other colors of iPhones. So it could be red, or it could be gold, but this one happens to be black. So what makes it black? Well, you can appeal to the pigmentation, which exists on the molecular level in the materials that it's made of. Okay, fine. That gives us an explanation for its blackness. But, and it's basically that, well, the molecules that its surface is made out of reflect or absorb certain frequencies of light. Okay, why do they do that? And here you might appeal to the laws of physics and say, well, the laws of physics are such that the molecules of a surface will either absorb or reflect certain frequencies depending on the molecules. Okay, why is that the case, though? Why do we have this set of physical laws instead of another? The laws of physics could be different. And so everything that could be different than it is what philosophers call contingent. And it ultimately, and a lot of things we see in the world are contingent, including my iPhone. It could be a different color if I'd bought a different one. So in order to get an explanation for the contingent things we see in the world, it's unsuccessful to propose an infinite regress of causes. And so most philosophers who've looked into this question, or at least most theistic philosophers who've looked into it, have concluded that whatever chain of explanations we propose needs to terminate in something that's not contingent, something that is necessary. And that necessary entity that explains all the contingencies we see in the universe, that would be God. So that doesn't prove everything about God, but that would prove we need additional arguments to prove additional aspects of God. But it does prove something that can be meaningfully be called God. And then from there, we need to talk about, okay, so what else can we figure out about God?
Do you mind if I'm asking you if you mind if I do something on my show? I was maybe I'm asking the audience too. Yeah.
Do what you want.
I'd like to share some of my thoughts on this question as well. So the question again is, why do you believe that God exists? So part of that question could be interpreted as like personal, like a psychological, autobiographical type of question. Like, why do you in particular believe? And so that's one way to interpret the question. And that answer is pretty easy. Like, I just grew up believing that, and I haven't really seen reason to reject it. But philosophically, why I'm convinced that God exists today could be explained through various arguments. And I think there's kind of like two ways to categorize what I would sort of appeal to. So on the one hand, we've got conceptual analysis, and on the other hand, I would point to different aspects of the world that would count as evidence for the existence of God. So in terms of conceptual analysis, I think everyone has to accept that there is some sort of foundational item that explains everything else. Atheists, I think, can even get on board, at least with that initial step. There's got to be something that is foundational or necessary, like Jimmy was just talking about, that explains everything else that is not foundational. And then the question would be, this is where the sort of conceptual analysis comes in. What is the best concept that can explain why something foundational exists? What is the best analysis of the foundation? And I think theism has a leg up over atheism in this respect. But then there's evidence or different phenomena in the universe that you could point to and be like, okay, well, that doesn't really make sense on atheism. Like the fact that the universe is life permitting. That's fine-tuning is another way that's usually something that is called the fine-tuning of the universe, why there exists a life-permitting universe at all. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense given atheism. There's not really much reason to expect a life-permitting universe, but there's other aspects we could appeal to. The fact that the universe began to exist, or that there's a first cause. Jimmy, I know that you and I are kind of, we don't necessarily 100% agree on that, but there's other aspects we could appeal to beyond that, like moral knowledge. But overall, the summary would be conceptual analysis of what a foundation would have to look like, and then that there's various pieces of evidence that basically point to the existence of God. And then I guess on top of that, I'd also add that the alleged counter evidence that's often brought against the existence of God, like evil, I think that can actually be accounted for in a theistic hypothesis. And actually, I think I'm convinced at this point that evil and suffering is actually more expected on theism than it is on atheism, because atheism doesn't predict conscious creatures that can suffer and go through any of those negative, bad experiences. So I think that actually theism is a better explanation of suffering and evil. So that would be my response to that, which is basically just comes down to the evidence. So I think the evidence points toward the direction of theism. So I think we're pretty much in agreement on that. And you just talked about contingency, right? And so that was just one aspect.
I could have said all the stuff you said, only it would have taken more time.
All right, let's get to a couple more super chats, then we'll turn to the next subtopic. So Brute Facts podcast says, closer to the speed of light you get, the more mass is gained. Objects that reach light speed would reach infinite mass. How do we overcome that, Jimmy? You did actually address that, but go ahead and repeat.
Yeah. So, well, one way is you jump past the light speed barrier. If you can get past it without crossing it, then the infinite mass, infinite energy problem doesn't apply. Another way of achieving the effect of superluminal travel without crossing the light speed limit is you stay at a finite speed or a sublight speed in your local space, but you move your local space faster than light. So you're not actually moving, let's say, with respect to the patch of space you're in, you're just pushing that patch of space faster than the speed of light, because space itself is not light speed limited. As I mentioned, the universe itself expands faster than the speed of light. And so the universe is made out of space, and space thus can go faster than the speed of light. It's objects that are light speed limited. And so if you can have an object in a patch of space and then you warp what's around that patch of space, you can move the patch of space faster than light. And that's how the Alcubierre warp drive works.
All right, let's take one more super chat from Rosita. This one's a quick one. If you wake up at 3 a.m., just pray. That is not bad advice at all.
No.
I mean, you can also go back to sleep. That's an option. Or you could pray. Both
you could pray to go back to sleep.
Pray to go back to sleep. You could also avoid getting on your phone, because that's like a natural temptation if you've got a smartphone, which most people do. So try to avoid that if you can. All right, let's go now to turn to our second subtopic, which is demons. All right, Jimmy, would you like to take this one away and spend a few minutes talking about demons?
Yeah. So every culture basically has evil spirits that it reports. And these are spirits that are harmful to humanity. They do things that are bad to living humans, and they're often called demons. Now, in a Christian context, the term demon has become restricted to non-human spirits, to angels that are created spiritual entities that have fallen. But you can also use the term more broadly to just refer to any kind of hostile, damaging, malicious spirit. And there is evidence for those that exists outside of Christian context. This is not just a Christian thing. It is found broadly in other cultures. In fact, a while back, I was reading a paper by a parapsychologist named D. Scott Rogo, who looked at cases in various cultures, including China, where there are spirits that possess people that behave very much like demons in a Christian context. And there didn't seem to be any way to account for this other than, it looks like we've got something affecting this person that could be meaningfully called a demon. Now, in addition to that kind of evidence for the existence of demons, we also have biblical evidence. And this is found in both the Old and the New Testaments. In Deuteronomy, for example, it says that the gods of the nations are Shadim, and Shed, or it's in its plural, Shadim, means demons in Hebrew. Shed is the Hebrew word for demon. And so we see the idea of demons in the Old Testament, and we see them involving themselves with humans on various occasions. You'll notice even in Deuteronomy, it says that the gods of these other nations are Shadim. So one of the things that, according to the author of Deuteronomy, that demons do is they apparently want people to worship them as gods. And we see similar statements in the New Testament concerning pagan gods. It's not that they don't exist, it's that they're actually on team evil. They're bad spirits that are encouraging people to not follow God and not do the things one should do as a follower of God, like be loving to God, loving God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. So then, when we turn from the New Testament era to the post-New Testament era, we find further examples of demons, including demons who possess people or who try to harm people in various ways. And these as spirits that have turned their back on God, on the Christian understanding, they're not on board with God's priorities. They don't love God and they don't love humans. And so they tend to be hostile to humans and want to do things to harm them. And there's, parallels and evidence of that in the New Testament and afterwards. When we read about, for example, the Gadarene demoniacs in the Gospels, they're hurting themselves with stones, and they're distressed, and they're preternaturally strong, and they're suffering because of what the demons are doing to them. The demons do not like God, they do not like his creatures, and so they want to harm them. And we see that in history as well. So we also need to be careful, though, about not leaping to the demon hypothesis too quickly, because there are a lot of things that demons can cause that also can be caused purely naturally. Like at one point, Jesus treats a boy in the Gospels who's demon possessed, and the boy has epilepsy, which the demon is causing. But epilepsy can happen for all kinds of reasons. It doesn't have to be a demon. And if you just looked at any medical condition or any psychological condition and said, oh, it must be a demon, then you would effectively prevent the rise of modern medicine and modern psychology, and that would be a mistake. So while we should be open to the hypothesis that demons are involved, we shouldn't rush to the demon hypothesis. Instead, we should recognize that demons have limited ability to affect things. Classically, in Christian theology, the devil's only one of three sources, even of sin. Classically, the three sources are the world, meaning the example that other people set for us that could lead us to sin; the flesh, which would be our own inbuilt disordered desires that could lead us to sin; and then the third is temptations provided by the devil. So even in classical Christian theology, the devil is not responsible for everything bad that happens. It would be a mistake. You need evidence for that. So what kind of evidence do you need? Well, basically, I'll use demonic possession as kind of the paradigm case, because this is one of the clearest ones. But in order to diagnose a demonic possession, you basically need someone who is manifest in an alternate personality. That would be the demonic personality that's speaking through them. So they need to be manifest in an alternate personality. But how do you know that's not just a mental illness or a hoax or a fraud? Well, they need to do something that an ordinary person can't do. In order to verify that, they need to be able to do something preternatural, like speak a language they've never studied, or levitate, or things like that. And so you need more than just an alternate personality. You need evidence that something paranormal or preternatural is actually happening in this case. It's not just mental illness. It's not just a hoax. This person is doing something they shouldn't be able to do. Okay, but that's not sufficient either, because studying being able to speak a language you haven't studied, that's xenoglossy, and that's one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Speaking in tongues is a gift of the Holy Spirit. Being preternaturally strong. Samson was preternaturally strong. How about levitation? Well, Jesus ascended into the sky. That's levitation. And saints like Saint Teresa of Avila and Saint Joseph of Cupertino have been known to levitate. And so actually all of these preternatural phenomena I just mentioned, whether it's speaking in a foreign language or levitating or being preternaturally strong, they all can be gifts of God. So you need more than that to show it's a demon. And that leads us to the final thing that you need, which is evidence of aversion to the holy. One of the things that has been observed in cases of demonic possession is that this alternate personalities that the people are dealing with are averse to the holy. They can't stand holiness. They can't bear to say the name of Jesus or look at a statue of the Virgin Mary. Things like that. And so I think if you have those three conditions, if you've got an alternate personality that's doing stuff that the person should not naturally be able to do, and that personality is averse to the holy, you have good supported evidence for a demon actually being present in this situation. So that's kind of a general sketch of how I'd approach the subject, and I'm happy to answer folks' questions about it.
All right, yeah, we're about to pull in Richard, but
first, though, we should remind people why we're doing this. Yes. This is a fundraising drive, and we really need to hear from people. Like I said, we've made progress, but we're not all the way there yet. And I mean, Cam and I have been texting back and forth every day about where we are on this, and we're not there yet. So we really do need to hear from you today. This is the last formal day of the fundraising drive. If we don't make it, of course, we'll continue to fundraise, but we don't want to have to do that. We want to be able to get to the break-even point, and then after that, just do normal, regular fundraising. We don't want to have to do these intense pushes, but we need to right now until we get to the break-even point. So by all means, please donate to us on Patreon or on DonorBox. The links are in the description below the video. And we have those thank you gifts we want to send you. Everybody who donates during this pledge drive gets the PDF summarizing the arguments for the reliability of the New Testament. If you're able to donate it at the $25 a month level, you get Pat Flynn's new book, which is getting outstanding reviews, The Best Argument for God. And if you're able to donate, that's at tier 3. And if you're able to donate at tier 4, which is the $50 a month level, you get the Statue of Turin sculpture, which is made out of brass and steel. So this is durable. This is not just cheap 3D printed plastic. It's highly accurate, and it's a great devotional object that'll help you remember exactly the kinds of sufferings that our Lord went through on our behalf. So please do let us hear from you today, either on Patreon or DonorBox. And we really appreciate the support that you're able to provide. And so we want to thank you in advance for all that you're able to do to help Capturing Christianity continue.
Yes. And I did want to mention, I mean, Jimmy's been saying this entire show, and you may not be aware, he's been saying, we need your help. And basically what that comes down to is he's actually on the board now. So Jimmy Akin, we made an announcement almost a week ago at this point that he is now on the board of Capturing Christianity. This is not a paid position. He is just joining it and trying to help us out. Yeah. So the expenses at Capturing Christianity are literally as low as they can be. And so we didn't pay Jimmy to come on and help us out. He's literally doing it out of the goodness of his heart. So, but I did want to mention we've had a couple comments saying that you become Catholic and then you start to promote this type of stuff. This sculpture was actually created by a Protestant. You may not know that, but the guy Matthew Collins who created it, he was Protestant when he created it. He did actually convert to Catholicism at Easter, but it was created during his time as a Protestant. So this is not something that is just going to interest Catholics. I think it should interest everyone. So.
Lots of Protestants have either a devotion to or an interest at least in the Shroud of Turin. Gary Habermas uses it in his arguments for Christianity, and he's a Protestant apologist.
I just wanted to mention that. All right, let's now pull in Richard, who he says that he's a religious person, and he wants to know why he should believe in demons. Let's go ahead and pull him in here. Hey, Richard, how's it going?
Let me sharpen that. I would rather say it this way. It seems an unhealthy degree of interest in the demon, in the demonic and the evil. Very unhealthy in our culture. I've never heard of anyone. I don't particularly know that we have the ability to discern mental illness from demonic possession with such accuracy. I think some of the people, we have certainly cases of people who were simply mentally ill, who were labeled demon possessed, and it cost them their lives. The person who shot up the Virginia school was clearly mentally ill but his parents were only trying to get him treated for demonic possession. And I really think it's just not healthy or useful, and it's distracting people. And as far as I'm concerned, I can tell if you don't play with the devil, and I'm not entirely sure these things exist in ways we understand. If you're not involved with the devil, he's not going to be able to come get you. So what is all this? It's only causing more trouble. And what I can tell you, what a real problem in the world is mentally ill people. Schizophrenia is a nightmare that a lot of good innocent people go through, suffer, and the church neglects their care. But meanwhile, everybody wants to talk about exorcism. for every exorcism, there's 100 people with schizophrenia. And I want to draw attention to that, because if one person with schizophrenia and their family thinks they're possessed and take them to the priest instead of the psychiatrist, you have a disaster brewing. And I really just want to make that emphasis because, oh, by the way, one other thing, I've worked with NAMI, which is the National Association for the Mentally Ill. I've met people with schizophrenia. Without high training, you would think that person was demon possessed. I promise you that. I promise you, if you've ever met a person in the full throes of schizophrenia, without the training and things that Jimmy here elucidates, you would think there's something demonic about the person. And that's the point I'd like to make, because there's no need for this. It's not helpful. Let's put this to the side and minimize it and focus on reaching out to the mentally ill community and helping them with our resources.
Well, let's do this, because Richard, we're looking for questions today, but what you just said can be put in the form of a question. Jimmy, what do you think about what he said?
Yeah, well, I actually agree with a lot of what Richard has said. I think there can be an unhealthy fascination with demons and demonic possession. And frankly, I think there are celebrity exorcists who are dealing with the topic in public in an irresponsible way. And part of what I do is try to help people find balance on this topic. And the way you help people find balance is not by saying, let's not talk about this. It's by saying, let's talk about it in a reasonable way. There are a lot of things that can just be mental illness that can explain these symptoms, or even physical illnesses that can explain these symptoms, like schizophrenia, such as you mentioned. I would differ on the idea that the church ignores the suffering of schizophrenics. The church has actually been involved in setting up hospitals, including mental hospitals, and specifically in connection with demons. Now, I can't speak for non-Catholic churches, although from the non-Catholic exorcists I know, they have similar procedures. But when they're presented with a proposed case of possession, they are meant to look, and the Catholic Church's official documents for exorcists discuss this openly. They are to look for mental illness and bring in mental health experts as needed. So if someone has schizophrenia and is taken to a competent exorcist, one of the first things he's going to do is investigate the possibility that this is mental illness, and schizophrenia is one of the leading candidates in that regard. So I think the greater danger and I hate to say it this way, but the greater danger is in the Protestant community, or at least in environments where you have people who are trying to do at-home exorcisms, where you don't have a trained exorcist who is trained to look for mental illness and similar causes. To make this point, in fact, Richard, I have an episode of Mysterious World I'd like to recommend to you. It's episode 188. On whether it's always demons. You can find it by going to mysterious.fm/188, and you can listen to it or watch the video. And I start that episode with 6 or 7 cases from the last 2-year period at the time we recorded it, of news stories of children who were killed in at-home exorcisms, because their parents thought the kids were demon possessed, and they thought things like, let's drive the demon out by holding the child under the hot water in the bathtub. And that's horrific. And I wanted to start in that shocking way with, look, here are multiple stories just from the last 2 years about how this can go off the rails. I wanted that to be a wake-up call for people not to leap to the demon hypothesis and to take alternatives seriously. And I spent the whole episode talking about the problems that would result if you automatically leap to the demon hypothesis without proper evidence. And I also talked about, so what kind of evidence do you need? But I share a lot of your concerns, Richard, and I think that we don't do a service to anybody by unhealthy fascination. What I'm trying to do is bring balance to help people arrive at a mature way of approaching the topic.
And Richard, real quick,
it's not exaggerated.
Before you come back on that, I'm looking in the notes here, and it also shows that you had a question about why you should believe in demons or in Satan. And you say, why can't they be a literary thing? Do you still have that question? Oh, sorry,
you're
you muted
muted.
yourself. Yeah, let me ask you to unmute in Zoom.
No, I don't really. I need to be going. So,
Oh, okay.
but thank you
Okay.
for your answer to me.
No
No
problem. All
problem.
right.
Thanks for
Thanks,
coming
Richard.
by.
All right, let's take some more super chats. This one from Cat4203. Do you think it's possible, because so many people have turned away from God and are practicing the occult, they are somehow summoning these objects in the sky from another dimension? We're talking about aliens.
Okay. Well, so the occult is a really problematic category. Occult just means hidden. And there's lots of stuff that's hidden, but that doesn't make it demonic. Like a classic example in from the Middle Ages is magnets. Thomas Aquinas would say, yeah, magnets have a hidden power or hidden virtue to attract metals, and they didn't know how it worked because it was something God had built into nature that was hidden from the knowledge of man at the time. It wouldn't be until the 20th century when we figured out how magnets work on the quantum mechanical level. So even magnets at one time were occult, but that didn't make them bad. I actually have, by the way, 2 episodes. It's episodes 105 and 106 of Mysterious World on Thomas Aquinas and the occult. So I tend not to use the term occult because it's so squishy. It's not really an informative term. But in terms of could people be summoning UFOs by things they're doing, well, there are actually UFO people, related people who claim that. There's a gentleman named Stephen Greer, for example, who claims to be able to telepathically summon UFOs. And he has excursions where he and various people who pay him money go out at night, and then they meditate and they try to summon a UFO, and he points up in the sky and announces, look, there it is, and he claims to be in telepathic contact with the creatures aboard it and stuff like that. Now here's the thing, he's a total fraud. I've got video. I did an episode on him too. And I have video that we analyze step by step where he's having one of these excursions on a beach in Florida, and a couple of lights actually appear in the distance. But when you analyze the video, they're flares. He hired a plane to drop flares in the distance to impersonate a UFO, a pair of UFOs. So I'm unaware of any actual evidence that would suggest that humans can summon UFOs through whatever practice you may want. So it's not impossible that somebody could summon a UFO, but I would want to see evidence that it happens. Otherwise, it just remains in the realm of speculation. It could be interesting to think about, but it's still only a possibility until you get evidence that this possibility is an actuality.
Yeah, I think it's important to emphasize that too. I mean, it's very easy to postulate all these different hypotheses, but you've got to get something that's going to ground it to reality, right? So, all right, let's move on to a question from Catholic with the Bible podcast. If there are intraterrestrial aliens that pre-exist us on Earth, what would be some potential implications of this practically and spiritually?
Okay, so I'm not 100% sure what Catholic with a podcast means by intraterrestrial. That could mean beings that live on the inside of the earth. And that could get us into hollow earth theory and stuff like that. What I would suggest broadening the term a little bit to what are known as cryptoterrestrials. Kryptos in Greek means hidden. And so if there's a hidden race of intelligent beings on Earth, then they would be cryptoterrestrials. And Catholic with a Bible podcast is envisioning what I'll call here cryptoterrestrials that pre-exist us on Earth, meaning they're older than the human race. What would be some potential implications of this practically and spiritually speaking? Well, it would depend on how they're related to us. I know that some, and personally, I'll tell you, I'm very skeptical of the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis. But since you asked, there are some proposals that suggest that there are cryptoterrestrials and that they may live inside the Earth and that they are responsible for the UFO phenomenon, and that they're an offshoot of humanity. They're like, imagine what if the what if instead of dying off, the Neanderthals had gone into hiding from Homo sapiens, and so they became a hidden race, and then they developed high technology. There's a gentleman named Mac Tonnies who proposed, he's unfortunately passed on at a very young age, but he proposed essentially something like that they were a biological offshoot of humanity, just a different subspecies of humans. And if that's the case, then they could even be considered just humans. They're just a different kind of human, and they might be able, you could maybe baptize them. They would, I'm sure if they're at all human, they have a concept of an afterlife. And if you have the concept of an afterlife, then I think you have an afterlife. And so if they wanted to be baptized, we could evangelize them. And if they wanted to be baptized, they could be baptized and become Christians. They would just be Christians of a different human subspecies. At least that's how I'd look at it.
All right, let's do a few more super chats, and then we'll turn to our last caller, who actually has a question on the alien demon hypothesis. So, okay. Silhouette, thank you for your substantial super chat, 100 euros.
Yeah.
God bless you guys. Thank you so much. And if you do send in a super... 100 pounds. If you do send in a super chat like that, it does also help the ministry. So that is one way that you guys can support. I will let you know, though, that on YouTube, they take a 30% cut if you support the ministry through YouTube. So we would prefer that you would donate through DonorBox, which is linked in the description of this video. It's actually takes you to our website. So it says donate ? And then link to our website, and you can send in one-time donations there. A little bit of an extra step, but it would help us out a little bit more.
But thank you so much for your generosity, Silhouette, and God bless you too.
Let's move on to Matt. Okay, Matt says, what do you make of so many sci-fi writers' interest in XP ethics, philosophy, and evangelism in relationship to alien civilizations?
I'm not familiar with what XP means in this context. Is that Christian ethics? Is that Cairo?
I am not sure.
Because he pairs it with not only its XP ethics, philosophy, and evangelization. And that would suggest to me that here XP is an abbreviation for Cairo, which are the first two words in Christ. And so I would assume that means Christian ethics, philosophy, and evangelization. So what do I make of so many sci-fi writers' interest in this? Well, I think that it's an interesting topic to think about. A lot of sci-fi writers come from a Christian context, even if they're not Christian themselves, and they wonder about these things. As far back as the Bread and Circuses episode of the original Star Trek series, you had this planet where the Roman Empire never fell, and they keep hearing all this discussion of sun worshipers, which the crew thinks is weird because in the Roman Empire, they didn't have a lot of sun worshipers, which is not true. I mean, people worshiped the god Apollo, and so they had sun worshipers. But for plot reasons, they say on this show that the Roman Empire didn't have a lot of sun worshipers. And then at the end, Lieutenant Uhura turns around and says, oh no, I've been monitoring their broadcasts, and it's not the sun in the sky they're worshiping, it's the Son of God. And that would imply that there was a parallel incarnation of Jesus on this planet in the episode Bread and Circuses. There have been other explorations of similar themes, like the novel The Sparrow, which involves a Jesuit attempting to deal with an alien culture and, figure stuff out about them so they could be evangelized. There's also a story, and this is not an alien-related story, but there's a story by Ted Chiang in, I want to say it's called Hell is the Absence of God or something like that, which is a fascinating story. Unfortunately, he gets the ending wrong. But it's a fascinating story where angels just appear in our world and do stuff. And it's a really interesting story, but I think sci-fi authors are just fascinated by this stuff. They're naturally creative. They want to interact intellectually in a fictional context with various ideas from Christianity. In fact, like even Larry Niven he incorporated the tree of life from the Garden of Eden, as well as the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, in his known space series, where there's a plant called Tree of Life that basically gives you an intellectual upgrade and kills your aging process. So Christianity has a lot of interesting ideas, and writers who are familiar with Christianity are interested in exploring those ideas and using them in various ways for fictional effects.
All right, one more super chat, then we'll turn to our next guest. So this one, Brute Facts Podcast, just says, I was sure I missed something, and this was related to his question on traveling faster than light. He just says, thanks, and I appreciate you guys. So thank you.
Likewise.
All right. Let's turn to our last subtopic, which is the alien demons hypothesis, and then we'll pull in our last caller. His name is Evo, okay. It looks like. So, Jimmy, take another few minutes, and let's discuss whether or not aliens should be correctly classified as demons.
Okay, so this is a hypothesis that has been proposed in various Christian circles. You find this for example, in the Protestant community, where it's supported by author Hugh Ross. I mentioned him earlier in the show. In the Catholic community, probably the lead author on this hypothesis right now is Daniel O'Connor, who was mentioned by one of our super chats earlier in the show. And I have a couple of concerns about this. The first concern, now I'm going to say straight out, could some apparent aliens be demons? Could some UFO reports be due to demons? Sure. Demons like angels can impersonate human beings, and they can do things like fly and levitate and, so forth. So demons, which are just bad angels, can do all those things too. So if demons wanted to impersonate UFOs or aliens, they could do that. I don't have any problem with this in principle. It could happen. But as always, my question is, what evidence do we have that it happens? And thus far, I have not seen good evidence for this. I did a whole episode of Mysterious World interacting with Hugh Ross's arguments. And frankly, I found them really, really, really weak. Like one of the things that you've mentioned, Calvin, is the availability bias that people have. Cameron, is the availability bias that people have. If you can think of a possible explanation, you tend to leap to that one because it's familiar and it's available to you. And in his book, which he co-wrote with, I want to say, is it Ken Samples? But it's a co-authored book. It's called like Little Green Men and Nocturnal Light, something like that. I'll actually see if I can get the name. But he argues substantially that aliens can't exist because life is so statistically unlikely that it shouldn't exist anywhere in the universe. His book is called Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men. It's by Hugh Ross, Kenneth Samples, and Mark Clark. And
by the way, I should mention, if Hugh Ross or someone associated with Hugh Ross happens to be watching this, I would love to set up a conversation between you and Jimmy. So
that'd be great. So one of his big arguments is they can't exist because life is so statistically unlikely, and intelligent life even more so. And he has calculations where he attempts to show this. But the problem, as I mentioned earlier in today's show, is that, well, then life shouldn't exist here either because of how improbable it is. But it does exist here. And so at a minimum, you have to conclude from a theistic perspective that God put it here. But if God put it here, then he can put it elsewhere. And so you can't use a statistical argument to say aliens can't exist, because God is omnipotent and can do anything he wants. And if we know he put life here, then we can't know he didn't put it elsewhere. So I think that's just a bad argument. There are a lot of other problematic arguments. Like he mentions how UFOs are sometimes seen to change shape. Okay, well, that happens sometimes. There are some reports of that. But you know what else changes shape? Airplanes. Even the ordinary airplanes we have now, they change their shape. They start out with their landing gear down. They take off. They retract the landing gear for most of the flight. Then when they're getting ready to land again, they put the landing gear back down. And that's just conventional airplanes. There are other airplanes that are known as variable geometry airplanes or swing wings, where the position of the wings changes. Airplanes can also do things like send out drones. They can launch other things that collect information and may come back to them and be reincorporated. And so just because you see a UFO change in shape, that doesn't prove it's a demon. We have variable geometry aircraft now, and in the future of aviation, we would expect to have even more variability in the shapes that our aircraft can assume. So I don't find this to be a good argument. And in fact,
I agree with both of those points, both of your responses.
Yeah. When it comes to a Catholic context, I mentioned Daniel O'Connor, and he's most famous for, like I said, he's got other arguments, but he's most famous for proposing that a couple of paragraphs in the Catechism show that only humans bear the image of God and of physical, visible creatures. And there's a sentence that says that, and then the sentence immediately after that talks about of all earthly creatures. So that's what it means when it says visible in the preceding sentence. The only way to get this, to get to where Daniel wants to go with this passage, is to rip that first sentence out of context and insist that we read it absolutely and without reading it in the light of the very next sentence. That's an exegetical mistake. And because statements must be read in context if you're going to interpret them properly. So he's using an exegetical strategy that will result in erroneous conclusions. And so I think that the argument is bad as well. And there are other dimensions to it as well. Like, for example, even if it's true that only man has the image of God, that doesn't mean that other things aren't intelligent, because intelligence is not what the author of Genesis is likely thinking about when he talks about the image of God. In fact, some of the better research these days points to the image of God as being God's representative on earth, just like an image of Pharaoh would represent the Pharaoh. Man is the image of God, so we represent God to the earthly creation, and we reign over it in his stead. That's why God makes man in Genesis 1. That's why God makes man in his image and then immediately commissions them to rule over the earth, because that's their job as his living image here on earth. And so, if mankind's the only creature that is the image of God, then that doesn't mean other intelligent creatures don't exist. It just means they're not meant to rule over the earth the way we are. So there are a variety of issues here, but keeping it short.
Yeah, let's go ahead and pull in Evo, I think is his name. Mm-hmm. He is our last call-in guest. He's got two questions for you. Evo, how's it going? Oh, actually, sorry, I need to ask him to unmute. 1 second. I asked you to unmute in Zoom, so just hit that button.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm Brazilian, so if my English is all over the place, I'm sorry. But
no problem.
Yeah, I had questions. You answered basically that aliens aren't necessarily demons or angels, but I wanted to know first if demons and aliens can be considered, demons and angels can be considered aliens, since they are, from my understanding, a kind of life form that is of another, otherworldly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if not from another planet. And my second question is kind of related to that, but you touched on the fact that aliens could be fundamentally different from us humans, not necessarily made in the image of God, but still intelligent. And I wanted to know what would be the implications of sharing possibly an afterlife in heaven or even hell, with beings that had a life that could have been fundamentally different from what we know as humans on planet Earth, on totally different conditions. So yeah.
Okay. So I'll try to take those questions one by one, and you let me know if I forgot any, okay?
Sure.
So the first question, in fact, I think I'll need your help at the moment. The first question was what again?
I wanted to know if angels and demons can be considered aliens.
Okay. It's going to depend on how you define your terms. I mean, originally the term alien just meant foreign. So from a Brazilian perspective, I'm an alien. And from an American Norte Americano perspective, you're an alien. We're both foreigners. We're from different countries. It then came to be applied to someone that was foreign to this earth. And a synonym of extraterrestrial was also proposed for it, meaning extra is Latin for outside of. And so an extraterrestrial is someone who's out from outside of Earth. And well, okay, angels and demons would fit that definition. So you could consider them extraterrestrial or alien in that sense. They're not from the earth, so they're foreign to it, and they're from outside of it. Specifically, they're from a spiritual realm, and they don't natively have physical forms the way we do. We're mixed, with both physical and spiritual. They're purely spiritual. So it could, even though you can use terms like alien and extraterrestrial to refer to them, they're not the only terms you could use, and using those terms could cause a little bit of confusion, because when most people hear about aliens or extraterrestrials, they tend to think physical ones, things that natively have bodies the way we do. Another term you could consider using for aliens, for angels and demons, is interdimensionals, because they're from a spiritual realm that doesn't function the way our material universe does. And that would be another dimension of some kind. At least you could call it another dimension. And so you could think about angels and demons as interdimensionals rather than extraterrestrials. On the other hand, there could be other physical dimensions. In fact, a lot of physicists these days think there are other physical dimensions. And so I tend to just keep the classical terms alien and demon so that they don't get confused with like physical beings from another dimension or from another planet. But you can use the terms in these ways. We just need to be careful when we're talking to people about here's the exact way I'm using this term in order to avoid confusion. Now, your next question was what?
It was, what would be the implications, generally, of sharing possibly an afterlife with alien life forms, which are fundamentally different from humans, even if from a biological perspective, but from totally different conditions from what we are used to here on Earth?
Well, so we don't know for a fact that aliens even exist, but we'll assume they do, and that they have an afterlife and so forth. Assuming that they do exist and that they do have an afterlife, we might not have contact with them in the afterlife, because the way the book of Revelation depicts the final state of humanity is with us living on a renovated new heavens and new earth. And you could say, okay, well, but the aliens, they may be on their renovated new Vulcan or whatever it is, but they're not here with us on the new earth. So we might both be in the afterlife, but not have contact with each other. On the other hand, there are proposals in the history of theology that basically in the resurrection of the dead, we're going to have superpowers. Like we're going to be immortal. For example, we're not going to be dying, and that's a superpower. And there have been proposals that will have other superpowers. In particular, one of them is referred to as subtlety. And technically they're not called superpowers, they're called preternatural gifts. But the preternatural gift of subtlety is basically the ability to teleport. So you can instantly be wherever you want to be. Kind of like Jesus was able to enter a locked room after his resurrection. And if we're going to be like Jesus in our resurrection, then we could potentially teleport too. And if that's the case, then even if our nearest alien neighbors are over on the new Vulcan, we could potentially teleport and learn about them and learn about their planet and their history and their interactions with God. So it would be kind of like just a larger version of what we expect the afterlife to be here on Earth, where we get to meet other humans who lived in different places and had different lives and different interactions with God. And we can learn about all them and all the stuff God did for them. And so it would be like that, only on an even broader scale.
Cool.
Yeah. Can I help you out with anything else?
I don't think so. You explained it very clearly. Sorry.
Awesome. No problem.
Thank you
your
so
English
much,
is
Ivo.
very good.
Yeah, very, very good. Very, very good. I actually have some other Brazilian friends that live here in the States, and yours is better. So good, great job. Good job. All right, let's
Thank
take
you.
Live long and prosper, Ivo.
You too.
See you later. All right, we have a few more super chats we'll get through, and then I think we'll close out the show. So this one, let me pull up the next one that we've got in the list here. Samir Asfour. Amazing show, guys. I want to ask Jimmy where the literature on angels and demons comes from. The story of the fall of Satan, its reasons, and so on, as like the details that 1/3 of the angels fell with him, for example.
Okay, so the last part's the easiest to address. The idea that 1/3 of the angels fell with Satan comes from Revelation chapter 12, where John sees a vision of a of a great red dragon with 7 heads in the sky, and it represents Satan. And there's a war in heaven, and he sees the devil sweep away 1/3 of the stars with its tail and like cast him down to earth. And so sometimes in the Bible and in related literature, stars represent angels. So this could be the devil causing 1/3 of the angels to fall. The problem is stars also get used other ways in Scripture. And in fact, they're a common symbol of apocalyptic judgment. Like when Isaiah is prophesying the destruction of a particular kingdom, he'll say things like, the sun is going to be dark and the moon is going to turn red and the stars are going to fall from heaven. And this is a symbol of how the existing order of things is going to be shaken up. And it's going to be as if the sun really went dark and the moon really turned to blood, and as if the stars really fell. But what Isaiah is describing is a military invasion. And so we can't just assume that stars represent angels when we see things like this, especially when we see stars fallen, because we know stars fallen from the sky is a common symbol of something else in the Bible. It's a symbol of some catastrophe. So then there's a second problem with the 1/3 of the angels proposal for what this means, because people in Christian history have tended to assume that whenever the angels fell, it was really early in human history, or even before human history began. But the events in Revelation 12 are described as if they're occurring in the lifetime of Jesus, or shortly after his ascension to heaven. And so that would mean this is a current satanic thing that's happening, where the devil is doing something in the present that is like going to cause a catastrophe that's going to affect people in the early church. And so I don't think that the idea that 1/3 of the angels fell is well grounded in Scripture. I don't think we have what we need to interpret this passage in that way. It seems to me it has other plausible interpretations that actually, to my mind, would be more plausible. So that's what I'd say about that. In terms of the early history of Satan, well, the book of Revelation identifies him as the serpent from the Garden of Eden. So we know he was on team evil by that point. He is commonly regarded as a fallen angel in Christian tradition, and he thus would have fell sometime before Genesis 3. Exactly when that is, we're not told. We're also not told why he fell. And there have been a bunch of proposals for why the devil fell. Frankly, I think they're all speculative. I don't think we have the data that we need to support any one of them as uniquely true. So you'll hear speculation on why Satan fell, but I don't think we know. Beyond, sin makes you stupid, and it was stupid for him to fall. There are some interesting discussions of this question, though, in some extra biblical literature. For example, in the Book of Jubilees, which was written about 150 BC, it actually it tells us when the angels were created. They were created on the first day of creation, and it describes the fall of various angels in conjunction with the events of Genesis 6. I've already done an episode on the Nephilim in Mysterious World where I talk about some of this, but I have a group of episodes coming up on the Book of Jubilees and on the Book of Enoch. I have two ones on that, which are pieces of extra biblical literature from the Second Temple era, and they may have had an influence on the New Testament. In fact, we know Enoch did because Jude quotes it. So he read it, he quotes it as a prophecy, and he's interacting with concepts from it. So even though it's not in the Bible or not in most Christians' Bibles, it's got some really interesting stuff, and you might want to check out those episodes as they come out because they do deal with the fall of angels.
All right, just a couple more super chats here. This one, interesting one, off topic, but still interesting. Giovanni says, as a Catholic lawyer myself, what is a canon lawyer? How does one become one? And what do they do? God bless you both.
Okay. So canon lawyers are people who are like lawyers, but they practice canon law. And canon law is the system of law that the Catholic Church has developed. It goes back to... it has elements from Roman law, from the 12 tables that have been brought forward and modified over the last 2,000 years. A lot of rules or canons, that's all canon means. It means a rule. A lot of rules got developed in Western Christendom, and so around the year 1900, an initiative got started to codify canon law, to put it all in one code or one book. And that led in 1917 to the release of the first code of canon law that tried to digest down all of these rules that had been developed over Christian history, except for those dealing with the liturgy. It left those in the liturgical books. And that 1917 code was then replaced in 1983 by a new revised code of canon law under John Paul II. And that 1983 code has then been modified periodically by both John Paul II and subsequent popes. So now it's updated kind of the way the United States Penal Code is updated. But in order to practice as a canon lawyer, one typically needs to go get a degree in it. And there are both licenses in canon law and doctorates in canon law. In terms of what canon lawyers do, some of them work for institutions other than the church, like they might teach canon law at a university, or they might work for a nonprofit ministry. But most of them are working for a diocese somewhere, and they handle legal issues in terms of church law that affect the diocese. What a lot of them do is they end up hearing a lot of annulment cases where the church, because of Jesus's prohibition on remarriage following divorce, they need to look at an initial marriage and see, was this really valid or not? So is the person really free to marry someone else? And so annulment cases take up a lot of what they do, but not all of what they do.
All right. I think we've got 2 more super chats we'll get through, and then we'll close out the show. From Rebecca, God bless your family and ministry. Thank you so much. What is the most convincing alien abduction story you know of? We have one down here in Pascagoula. Is that how you say that? That seems
Pascagoula,
legit.
Mississippi.
That seems legit, where 2 men claim to have been taken while fishing on the river.
Yeah. So the Pascagoula event happened in 1973, and it is one of the more convincing ones. Like I said, I'm not persuaded by any of these, but that one is harder to explain.
Tell us the details on that one.
So there are 2 guys, Calvin Hickson, and their last names were Parker and Hickson. They were an uncle and nephew.
Should I assume that you've done an episode on this?
Oh yeah, I did an episode on this. And they worked at a shipyard, and then after work they would go fishing. And so they went fishing, and while they were fishing, a craft of some kind with lights came down behind them, and they were independently abducted by things that looked kind of like robots. They were taken into separate compartments of the craft and given an examination, and then they were let go. And they thought, well, what if this is part of an invasion? We should report this to the authorities. So they called the Air Force. They'd heard about Project Blue Book. And so they called Keesler Air Force Base nearby in Mississippi. And they were told, sorry, Project Blue Book has been shut down. We no longer do that, because it was shut down in 1970. They were 3 years too late. We no longer do that, but you can contact the civil authorities if you want. So they called the local sheriff, and the sheriff sent some police officers to bring them down to the station. And they checked to see, are these guys drunk? Well, one of them had 1 beer, but neither one of them was drunk. They also did something interesting, which is because the guys were really freaked out, especially Calvin Parker, the younger of the 2. Charlie Hickson, that was the name of the other guy. And Calvin was really freaked out by all this. He was very young. He was like less than 20 years old, I think, at the time. And so they interviewed them separately about what they'd seen, and then they put them together in a room and left them alone. What they didn't know was that the police had left a tape recorder in the room with them that was hidden. So they were hoping that one of them would spill the beans about this prank they're playing on the police, and then they could dismiss the whole thing and maybe even prosecute for wasting police time. But they didn't. They continued to be just as freaked out while the police were out of the room as they were when the police were in the room. Neither one of them said anything to incriminate themselves. They sounded like, and you can even listen to the tape because it still exists. They sounded like they believed what they just reported had happened to them. So this has some evidence in its favor that other cases don't. But I'm still not persuaded 100%. Hang on just a second. And I do think it's a case I'm open-minded about, but I have yet to find an abduction case that fully convinces me. I think.
So why are you still skeptical on this one?
Well, it's just partly it's because of things that happened later on. Not that radically altered the evidence in any way, but this is still a case. This is a case report from 2 guys who seem credible, but we don't have independent verification. They're related to each other. They could be making up a story. It's not like we have people who are not related to them testifying to the same thing. Although there has been some interesting work done recently on additional witnesses who, even if they didn't see Parker and Hickson get abducted themselves, there were people reporting seeing things like the craft that they claim abducted them in proximity in space and time to the abduction. In order to be fully convinced, I need something that goes beyond a personal story. I'm open to personal stories being true, but I would want to see something physical and measurable that we don't have in this case.
I've actually got the recording of them pulled up. Do you have time to listen to it?
Oh, it's like 20 minutes long.
Okay, never mind. Maybe we'll just suggest people go listen to it on their own.
Yeah. There are other cases I've looked at of abductions that I think are not as good as this one. I don't think the Betty and Barney Hill abduction from the 1960s is as good as this. I think that has a purely natural explanation. I'm also going to be looking at Whitley Strieber's reported encounters with aliens from his book Communion. I have an episode coming up on that. And I'm not accusing Whitley of lying, but I think he was misperceiving naturally explainable phenomena.
All right, let's do another super chat from Pop. Joe Rogan recently mentioned Ezekiel's vision and thought it may have been aliens. Would Jimmy elaborate on where the throne in Ezekiel came from in the symbolism, i.e. Egypt, to clear it up? Jimmy, do you mind if I actually pull up Ezekiel 1 and
Sure.
we just go ahead and read through it? Because it is pretty fascinating. So let me see if I can get it on the screen here. That is not what I'm looking for. Hang on a second, guys. I didn't have this prepared, so that is, let me see if I can adjust this to a different scene. That's not what I want. So I guess I can actually just read it. Let me do that. So Ezekiel 1 is starts off like this in the ESV. In the 13th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the exiles by the Chebar canal, Kabar, maybe that's the right way to say that. The heavens were opened and I saw Chabar. The heavens were opened and I saw visions of God. On the 5th day of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim. The word of the Lord came to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the Kabar canal, and the hand of the Lord was upon him there. As I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire as it were gleaming metal. And from the midst of it came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had a human likeness, but each had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like burnished bronze. Under their wings on their 4 sides they had human hands, and their 4 had their faces and their wings thus. Their wings touched one another. Each one of them went straight forward without turning as they went. As for the likeness of their faces, each had a human face. The 4 had the face of a lion on the right side, the 4 had the face of an ox on the left side, and the 4 had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces, and their wings were spread out above. Each creature had 2 wings, each of which touched the wing of another, while 2 covered their bodies, and each went straight forward. Wherever the Spirit would go, they went, without turning as they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, like the appearance of torches moving to and fro among the living creatures. And the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. And the living creatures darted to and fro like the appearance of a flash of lightning. Now as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the earth beside the living creatures, one for each of the 4 of them. As for the appearance of the wheels and their construction, their appearance was like the gleaming of beryl. And the 4 had the same likeness, their appearance and construction being as it were a wheel within a wheel. When they went in any of their 4 directions without turning as they went. And their rims were tall and awesome, as the rims of all 4 were full of eyes all around. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them. And when the living creatures rose from the earth, the wheels rose. Wherever the Spirit wanted to go, they went, and the wheels rose along with them. For the Spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. And when those went, these went, and when those stood, these stood. And when those rose from the earth, the wheels rose along with them, for the Spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Over the heads of the living creatures there was the likeness of an expanse, shining like awe-inspiring crystal, spread out above their heads. And under the expanse their wings were stretched out straight, one toward another, and each creature had 2 wings covering its body, And when they went, I heard the sound of their wings, like the sound of many waters, like the sound of the Almighty, a sound of tumult, like the sound of an army. When they stood still, they let down their wings. Then there came a voice from above the expanse over their heads. When they stood still, they let down their wings, and above the expanse over their heads there was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like sapphire, and seated above the likeness of a throne was a likeness with a human appearance. And upward from what had the appearance of his waist, I saw as it were gleaming metal, like the appearance of fire enclosed all around. And downward from what had the appearance of his waist, I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and there was brightness around him. Like the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud on the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness all around. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard the voice of one speaking. Pretty wild.
Yep. It's a visionary experience. And in the vision, Ezekiel sees several things, which none of which have anything to do with UFOs. The first thing he sees are these four-winged creatures that elsewhere are known as the cherubim, or to give it a more Hebrew pronunciation, chruvim. And they are spiritual beings that we know about from not just ancient Israelite sources, but from other sources as well. The second thing he sees are these wheels that are associated with the cherubim, and they're described as being covered with eyes on their rims, and they're also described as being a wheel intersecting a wheel. So they may be kind of like it's hard to. We don't really have a name for this shape, but they may be wheels that are like at 90-degree angles to each other. So it looks kind of like a Christmas tree ornament. And at no point are the cherubim said to get inside these things. Everything they move in parallel with each other. And then the third thing that Ezekiel sees is a throne that has God on it, which is above the cherubim and the wheels. So what we're looking at here is a divine throne scene with God and his throne. The cherubim are his throne attendants, and the wheels may represent the wheels of his chariot or throne. Throne chariots and wheeled thrones were a thing in the ancient Near East, and we have carvings of kings and gods sitting on their thrones with wheels, just like we have wheels on a lot of modern chairs. In fact, I'm sitting on a chair with wheels right now, and I suspect you may be too, Cameron. So, well, kings had those in the ancient world, and that's what we're looking at here. This has nothing to do with UFOs.
Yeah, and I think the rest of the context of Ezekiel also makes that clear. But people like to focus on the weird stuff and try to draw.
And it is weird, but that doesn't make it UFOs. Just because something is scary doesn't make it a demon. Just because something weird doesn't make it an alien.
Yeah. All right, let's do one more super chat. This one's still on topic, and then we'll close out. Absurd Scandal. Thoughts on Joseph Jordan of MUFON's work on Christians instantly stopping abduction in Jesus' name. His interviews on this converted him with hundreds of cases.
Well, I would like to see the documentation on that. I think that would be very interesting evidence. But I have looked for such evidence and have not found it. I've heard anecdotal reports, but a couple of thoughts. The first one is, like one place I looked for this is in Hugh Ross's book, because he's an evangelical. And so I would expect him to use this as an argument in his book, but he didn't. And so I found that significant. Also, here's the thing. Demons are rule breakers. That's why they're demons. So if you say, get out in Jesus' name, I don't know how much folks know about exorcism, but it can take a lot to get a demon out. And if these things were demons, I wouldn't expect them to stop just because you say stop in Jesus' name. Demons that are determined to do you harm are going to do you harm. And they're not going to be that easily stopped, not if they've taken the trouble to show up in physical form. So, given how difficult it can be to get a demon out through exorcism, I wouldn't expect a simple verbal command by an ordinary layperson to have much effect on them. There was something else I was going to mention in that connection as well. Oh yeah. In addition to anecdotal reports of people saying, yeah, I said stop in Jesus' name and they did. There are also anecdotal reports of the opposite, of where people says stop in Jesus' name and the gray aliens say, we don't care about your religion. So that argument kind of cuts both ways.
I was going to mention that the exorcists that I've talked with, they all basically agree on the point that in order to be possessed by a demon, or maybe not in cases of vexation or oppression, but in order to actually be possessed, you've got to invite that in. And so a lot of the demons, that's one of the reasons, well, maybe you can comment on that, but what I was going to say is that one of the reasons why a demon will resist, even though you say, in Jesus' name come out of them, is because they'll say, well, this person invited me in, so I have a right to be here. So it's not like a situation where you just say a magic incantation and then you do away with the situation. It seems like there's a little bit more going on there when you I guess, the person's will is involved. And so it's not as clear cut as just like say the thing and then it stops.
Yeah. So we're in an area where the Catholic Church doesn't have a teaching. And so this is an area of theological speculation, and exorcists themselves are not all agreed on this. I know one group of exorcists does advocate the kind of theory that you're talking about, but not all of them do. In fact, I've seen other exorcists say, look, we really shouldn't be blaming the victim here, because there are people who get possessed who don't seem to have any fault at all. Like the little boy who has had a demon that caused epilepsy from birth in the Gospels. There's no evidence that he as a tiny child, invited a demon in, even like Father Gabriel Amorth from Italy, who I'm not the biggest fan of. He says some stuff that's right some of the time, but he also has some wild theories. But he agrees that most people who get possessed are not at fault. I also have a second concern about this theory that, you can think of this as the legal entitlement theory, that demons will not enter you unless they're legally entitled to. The problem is that if demons were such rule observers that they will not enter your body, your property, without your consent, then if they follow rules to that extent, then they will all leave immediately as soon as you hang up the eviction notice. And experientially, they don't. They hang on. They try to stay in a person. And my theory of what actually one of the principal factors that gets them to leave is their aversion to holiness. What you're essentially doing in an exorcism is setting off a holiness stink bomb. You're trying to build up so much holiness with the prayers and the holy water and the people praying outside and the fasting and saying Jesus' name and the litanies and so forth. You're trying to make it intolerable for the demon to stay. And that's why they finally leave, because they can no longer tolerate the holiness you're shoving in their face. So I don't think this legal transaction-based theory is well supported by the evidence of what actually happens in these cases. And certainly there are different views among exorcists, and I tend to agree demons are more like bears than rule followers. They'll attack if they see an opportunity, and we can't count on them following rules. But that's how I'd look at it.
Yeah, I've got more thoughts on that, but let's go ahead and wrap things up. And also, I should mention, I was looking at the live chat, and one of our moderators actually is good friends with Hugh Ross. Oh, so we might have a connection there to be able to set something up. So
I'd be happy to discuss this with him. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, today was a very interesting show. Very, very, very interesting stuff.
And we hope that you see the value in what we're doing here, and because we need your help. as we mentioned, this whole week, we've been doing catch-up fundraising. We were prevented from being able to do regular, just maintenance level fundraising by various factors. And so we got into a deficit situation, and now we need to fix that. The good news is when we looked at the books last week, okay, we've got 5 months to fix this, and that's doable. We only need 160 people at the $25 a month level, and the problem will be solved. We've made progress this week towards that goal, and it's been substantial progress, but we are not there yet. We still have a good way to go. So please, if you see the value of the work that Capturing Christianity is doing, do support it at whatever level you can. For everybody who's able to support it during this current fund drive, we're going to give you that free PDF of the book summarizing the arguments for the reliability of the New Testament. If you're able to donate at the $25 a month level, we're going to give you Pat Flynn's new book as a thank you gift in addition to the PDF. This book's getting really high praise. It's on arguing for the existence of God. And if you're able to donate at the $50 a month level, we'll send you the devotional item, the statuette of Jesus based on the Shroud of Turin, which is worth $350. So if you're able to support us at any of those levels or at any other level, please do go to Patreon. The link for Patreon is in the video description right below this. If you want to make a one-time donation, you can do that through DonorBox. And if you don't like Patreon, you can make a regular monthly donation through DonorBox. Either one of those is just fine. We just need to hear from you right now so that we can go forward into the future confident that we are where we need to be, that we're in a break-even situation, that the ministry is not going to go out of business in a few months, and that we can keep doing the work that is done on this channel, which, as you know, is not typical of a lot of apologetics channels. There are a lot of apologetics channels that are painful to watch because of amateurishness, or this is just tribal chest thumping and virtue signaling. It's not trying to take other positions seriously. What happens here on Capturing Christianity is rare, and it needs to be supported. There are even supporters who aren't believers in God, but who still see the value of the work. So if you are a believer in God, don't let yourself be outdone by the unbelievers. Step up, help support it, and help the work continue going forward.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thank you guys for watching. I'm trying to take this off and give you guys a little hat bow. What I don't know. Anyways,
tip your hat.
Tipping probably made more sense. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it. Jimmy, great show as always. And yeah, thanks for helping us out so much and everything that you do.
My pleasure. And I look forward to when we're able to announce that Capturing Christianity has met its fundraising goal and it's where we need to be. But that won't happen without you helping. So please do help us today.
Yep, and we will make that announcement as soon as it happens. We will be back here and let you guys know about the good news. So thank you guys for supporting. Thank you for watching. Even if you're just watching, you're not supporting us, totally fine. Go at least subscribe, like the video, share it, do all those things. But appreciate you guys, and we'll see you in the next video. See you guys soon. Hey, it's me again. Actually, don't leave yet. I've got something super important to tell you. So first of all, you're awesome. Like you just watched a really long video just now, and you're still watching it. That is actually pretty amazing. Secondly, we have literally hundreds of other apologetics related videos for you to watch on our channel. Go check them out. I've interviewed exorcists, hosted debates between Christians and atheists. I've even made response videos to atheists. All of that is available on our channel. Go check it out. Third, I rely on people that see value in my work, people like you that watch videos to the very end, to keep the lights on around here. Literally, this is how I feed my family. So if you see value in the work that I do, please consider supporting this ministry and becoming a patron. Links to that are in the description. Oh, and have I mentioned that Christianity is true?